Hey, Candy Kane, what's up? It's the Culture Detective here, investigating your favorite movies, and today I am going to do another movie review where I review a movie that I watched simply because I was in a college course. But this time I'm not gonna review this movie alongside with other movies. This time I'm gonna review this movie alone because I love this movie, and that is Adaptation, written by Charlie Kaufman and directed by Spike Jonze. Movie released in 2002. Holy crap. Holy crap. This movie, man. I love it. I love it. I don't know what to say. I love this movie. And I feel like I love it more than people would usually do because before watching this movie, I have watched Being John Malkovich, also written by Charlie Kaufman and directed by Spike Jonze. And having watched that movie and then now watching Adaptation, it's just like mind breaking. Second of all, writing stories is my hobby. I love writing stories. Whenever I feel bored, I write a story. I write down scenes. I write down notes. I design characters in a little Google Doc. And watching this movie is kind of relatable, actually, very relatable. So essentially, the plot of this movie is basically, the plot. Charlie Kaufman wrote this movie. He is also in this movie. He is a character in this movie, played by Nicolas Cage. So Charlie Kaufman is a character in this movie, and he was told in this movie to adapt. The candy. Oh my god, the can. Okay, so in this movie, Charlie Kaufman was asked by a Hollywood executive producer, played by Tilda Swinton. She asked Charlie to adapt, to make a movie adapted from the book called The Orchid Thief, written by Susan Orleans, who is actually a real person. But in the movie, she's played by Meryl Streep. And that book is about an orchid thief by the name of John LaRoche. And in the movie, he is played by Chris Cooper. And he's also a real person in real life. So, and The Orchid Thief is also a real book in real life. So, basically, in the book, John LaRoche was an orchid thief. You know, he moves on from one passion to another. He started with turtles, and then he then got interested in another thing, and eventually he became really interested in flowers and orchids. So he decided to poach orchids, except that's illegal. But people can't prosecute him because he made Native Indian Americans do it for him, and people just can't prosecute Native Indian Americans. And so he became this orchid thief, and Susan Orleans, a reporter, decided to write a book about it. And then Charlie Kaufman was asked to make a movie adapted from this book, but he can't because this book has this really rambly structure that is very plotless. It's almost like nothing happens, and he spent weeks after weeks after weeks trying really, really hard to figure out a way to adapt this book into a movie, into a story, but he can't because it's impossible. The book is too uneventful. The book is too structureless. It's not movie material. So at the end, he's just like, you know what? Just fuck it. I'm just gonna write myself into the movie and have the movie be about me trying to write a movie adapted from this book and struggling. So the plot of this movie literally is the writing process for its own movie. I've never seen something this meta, okay? I've never watched a movie this meta. I've never. This is actually brilliant. And having seen Being John Malkovich, and the first scene number one of the movie is literally on the set of Being John Malkovich, Charlie Kaufman, played by Nicolas Cage, on the set, and he was told, what are you doing here? Just get out of the set, get out of the studios. And Charlie Kaufman left the studios and started, being, very anxious and panicking. And immediately I was hooked. So again, if you haven't watched Being John Malkovich and you watch Adaptation immediately, you probably wouldn't be hooked immediately. But having seen Being John Malkovich and seeing literally Charlie Kaufman on the set during the filming of the last movie he wrote, but he's actually played by Nicolas Cage. It's brilliant. Speaking of Nicolas Cage, I think the performances are amazing. Nicolas Cage, a very esteemed actor, high praise, and he actually played two roles in this movie. He plays Charlie Kaufman and Charlie Kaufman's twin brother, Donald Kaufman, who actually doesn't exist. So at first I thought he exists. I looked it up. Apparently he doesn't. But he's also credited for writing this movie. And I think this movie, won an award, an Oscar. And Donald Kaufman won, even though he doesn't exist. It's ridiculous. And it's amazing. Again, when it comes to the technical aspects of this movie, it's nothing all that crazy. But it's the story that really makes me go, oh my god. Another thing that this movie explores is feeling like a loser, because a majority of this movie is where Charlie Kaufman just self-loathing, hating on himself. I'm fat, I'm ugly, this is not going to work, I'm not good at this, I don't know what to do. And it makes his character so real, and there's a lot of comedy that came out of that character as well. And feeling like a loser. And when I watch this movie, I'm like, yep, kind of relatable. And even more relatable knowing that Charlie Kaufman in this movie is a writer and is experiencing writer's block. And again, the creative process behind this movie is inside the movie now. So at some point he's like, the movie opens off with John LaRoche in a car, in a van, trying to steal some orchids. And that actually became a scene in the movie. And then later he's like, you know what, screw that. It opens off with Susan Orleans, the writer of the book about John LaRoche. And he's like, you know what, screw that. The movie opens off with me. I feel like a loser. I'm fat, I'm ugly. And at that point he was kind of heated, and it still ended up in the movie. In fact, that was like the first scene. It's really amazing. It's also amazing how self-aware he is. Like, he really puts himself in the movie, and he really didn't hold back. There are scenes of him like fantasizing and jerking off and not being able to speak to women, sweating very vigorously. There's a lot of self-awareness. And then there's Robert McKee, who is like apparently this writing master, a master of writing, a master of script writing. And in my college course, in my script writing college course, our professor also recommended a book by Robert McKee. And Robert McKee is also in this movie, played by another person. And he's like an asshole, because in this movie, Charlie Kaufman hates the state of Hollywood that it is in, and it was in. Everything is really corporate, everything is really cheap and cliche, and he wants actual genuine good story. But Robert McKee is kind of a part of that corporate mindset where, if you want to write a story, it must have a 3-act structure, it must have a climax. If the character doesn't have a conflict, then it's got to be bad. There are rules you must follow. And in this movie, Charlie Kaufman is kind of against that. And so Robert McKee in this movie is kind of an asshole, but at the same time, he's not like the worst person in the world. We still see the good side of him in this story, in this movie. And it's also really funny and really smart. The first half of this movie has a lot of narration, and then the moment Robert McKee in this movie said, narration sucks. No more narration. It's just gone until the final scene. But after Robert McKee's like, no narration. Narration sucks. The narration just stopped. It never happened again. And it's also really like ingenious. Robert McKee in this movie told Charlie Kaufman, it doesn't matter if the first act or the second act sucks. The third act is key. The third act must be amazing. You must wow the audience. That's why in this movie, that is Adaptation, the first and second acts are normal and they're really realistic. And then it's the third act that suddenly goes really wild, really all over the place, really extreme with all kinds of sex and drugs and like chases in the jungle and guns. It's crazy and it's all over the place. And if you think about it, that is almost the result of what Robert McKee had said to Charlie Kaufman in this movie, and perhaps in real life as well. Who knows? Of course, we also have the Donald Kaufman character, the twin brother of Charlie Kaufman, and he's also like a script writer in this movie, and he writes the most cliche, the most trite crime thriller that Hollywood has ever seen. A serial killer, but then there's like an identity plot twist, and Charlie Kaufman has always been like, wow, that is shit. But people all around Charlie Kaufman all enjoyed Donald Kaufman's script, which Charlie thought sucks. Again, that is kind of a statement on Hollywood, but at the same time, that's also kind of a statement where he almost mocks the act and the process of story writing. Like, at the end of the day, people just enjoy what they enjoy. It doesn't matter if the story is, this genuine, groundbreaking, mind-bending kind of life kind of thing. If you have a good formula, if you have, good writing skills, just write whatever, and people are gonna like it. And that's almost like the hidden statement. And again, really self-aware, really meta, really interesting as well, full of layers, and I highly recommend this movie to anyone and everyone, especially people who write stories. I also highly recommend Being John Malkovich, which is the movie before this one. I also watched I'm Thinking of Ending Things, released last year, but I think after, like, I feel like Charlie Kaufman's work has changed throughout the years. At first, it's really self-aware and layered, like Adaptation and Being John Malkovich and Eternal Sunshine, and then we have Synecdoche, New York, which I haven't watched because I feel like I need to be a little older to be able to feel this movie. So I'm gonna put that aside for now. And then there's Anomalisa, which is also a fantastic movie, but Charlie Kaufman has began to wander off to more like psychological aspects of human life. And then I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which is essentially growing old sucks, but in a very hallucination type way. Yeah, I love Adaptation. I think it's a fantastic movie. I am giving it a strong 9 out of 10. So, have you watched Adaptation? From 1 to 10, how much did you rate it? Like it, and subscribe if you want more. And thanks for watching. I'm going to review The Father next.